Mathew Owens is the founder of OCG Properties, LLC, a company that specializes in equity and cash flowing real estate investments. What does that mean? He prepares, it's called preparing turnkey properties. You buy a property that he does rehab in order for you to buy it with a tenant. So it's cash flowing for you. All right, he graduated from UC Santa Barbara with a bachelor's degree in economics with an emphasis in accounting, earning a CPA license while performing audit and taxation engagements at various CPA firms, focused primarily on large real estate clients. So he knows the numbers from the CPA side. But then he got tired of it, and I'm sure he'll tell you a little bit about that. He currently specializes in value-add, cash-flowing residential and multifamily real estate investments. Cash, value-add means he fixes it. Cash-flowing means you guys get the cash. Residential, single-family, or multi-units. Anybody want residential or multi-units? Okay, cool. That's what this guy does. Come back. Come back. Come back. I need you. Come back. I haven't memorized this. I'm not an actress. I'm a numbers person. All right. Mathew works with investors in multiple ways to acquire real estate in high cash flow markets around the country. He also helps investors develop various cash flow streams through syndications run by professional operators. Promissory notes, you can lend him money and he'll give you cash. What's your current interest rate?
3%.
Bull puppy. Don't you dare do that to my group. There's no way.
I usually raise capital around 8.
Around 8. All right, so right now you give him money, he gives you 8% annually. Anybody want 8% cash on cash?
Yes.
You do have it like, what's that called? Mailbox money? Right? I like mailbox money personally. I'm real attached to that these days. Many of his clients benefit from his knowledge of real estate taxation and due diligence, legal and investment structuring, long-term investment planning and analysis. He runs the Long Beach FIBI. He also co-runs the Manhattan Beach FIBI. And his topic tonight, according to his notes, is how to create cash flow streams through real estate to become financially free. Anybody want financial free?
Yes.
I do. I do. And I enjoy that they're doing this until I'm so old, they're going to have to put me away and declare me incompetent. I won't be allowed to sign my own contracts anymore. And by then, my daughter will be running it, and then I won't care anymore. All right, that's my plan. Now I have to tell my poor daughter that. Now she's 7. I think she's got a little bit of time, though, before we get there.
Wait. How old were you when you did your first trade?
How old was I? Did what?
When you did your first
real estate deal?
No, your first
investment? Okay, so I'll tell the story. So I was 9 years old. Seriously. And my mom laid me on her bed, and she opened up this newspaper to this page with a whole bunch of little tiny print on it. A bunch of letters and some numbers next to it, long columns. She says, honey, this thing's called a stock. Stock, what's that? She says, well, basically, you give them money, and they give you money back. It's more than what you gave them. And she said, so you have some money. I had some money from my dad, who we were divorced, single mom, 3 kids. Dad was divorced. But he'd given me some money. You can spend that money on a toy, or you can buy a stock that will give you money back. That toy, I guess I can put some money on a stock. So she walked me through it. She said, well, this one really is dumb. Like do you think people want to keep buying bubble gum and they want to keep buying it in the future? But yeah, I love gum, absolutely. So that was my first stop. And my first stop was at least gum because I'm wrong. So my daughter, who's 7, about 2 years ago when she was 5, I said, let me tell you about something. It's called stock. And so she likes the idea a lot. All right, Mathew. All yours.
Thank you very much.
He is not using a PowerPoint presentation, so
I'm
going to
winging it
have
today.
a piece of chocolate.
Thank you guys very much for coming. So I figure after this, I'll be all real estate out and talking about it. My wife will be very happy. So she's tired of me talking about real estate all the time. I come up to her last night and I thought of a new strategy, and I'm like, I'm a financial genius. Oh my God, babe, what's going on? She's like rolling her eyes again, like, shut up, again. I can say that to her. But so who here is interested in flipping houses? Who wants to flip houses? Okay. And who wants to develop cash flow streams? And who wants to invest in single family and multifamily? Okay. What about syndications and promissory notes? You guys?
Can you explain what that means?
will absolutely explain what that means. So all of them are important to develop financial freedom. Absolutely all of them. And I think it's important to understand that it's imperative to flip and learn that strategy as well as the hold strategy. Because you have to do, especially if you don't have any capital. I started out quitting my CPA firm job where I was working on the other side of a table from a CEO that was talking about buying $20, $30 million apartment buildings in different areas of the country, where I would go in and audit these apartment buildings and help them. The reason I had to audit it is because it was government subsidized apartment buildings. And they're talking about buying these buildings, and the owners are just sitting there telling the CEO, yeah, go ahead, you got the numbers, go buy it. And it was at that moment I realized I'm sitting on the wrong side of the table here, and I need to quit and go into real estate and learn that aspect of things. I actually didn't quit for another 3 or 4 years. I actually quit the firm and went to another firm and got a lot more real estate experience working with different companies that worked in real estate and actually getting to see the entire operations of that business. The first job I had, I was analyzing and auditing all these different multifamilies, which was a great eye-opening experience to understand the numbers behind this, because the numbers are everything. Well, property management is everything, the numbers are second. So when you're investing, you want to go through and constantly be finding new strategies and new resources and new tools to learn on how to invest. So for example, when I quit my CPA firm job, it was 2006, or actually it was early 2006. So I was a real estate genius for 6 months, and then I was an idiot. I was like, we got an office at the World Trade Center in Long Beach on the 23rd floor. My 2 partners were stepbrothers of mine, really, really smart guys. It was hard to talk to people because they were engineers and computer programmers, and I'm a CPA. Like, yeah, we know how to market, like, give me a break. And it was interesting because when the market crashed, we basically parted ways. I went and started working at home, going, I'm not quitting. Stepbrothers went and got jobs, understandably. It's the scariest time in the world to be in real estate as soon as the market crashes, and realizing, oh, there's economic fluctuations. Crap, you learn some really, really hard lessons that way. And I can tell you, if you haven't learned those lessons yet, if you haven't lost money on a deal, you're not doing enough deals, and you're not. And that's the best way to learn. I would literally, and I lost everything at that time. I had a 790 credit score. Like, my ego was built on my credit score, and I just got punched in the face, like, really, really hard. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, honestly. That's when I learned how to raise private capital, because at that time, the banks stopped lending, right? That was my only exit strategy, was the bank financing on the back end. And when you learn that aspect early, which I did, you learn how to maneuver. You learn how to be smart about what your next move is going to be and find resources you didn't know existed. So now, 10 years in, I raised $500,000 a month from different clients very easily, from just relationships that I've built over and over and over again. But it takes a lot to do that. You have to know how to protect your investors' money. You have to know what you're doing on the properties and put major buffers in place so that way you're protecting them and yourself at the same time. You don't want to go do all this work and then lose money or lose your investors' money, and then you lose all of your investors because you lose your reputability if you lose your investors' money. So remember, if you're borrowing funds from investors to do this, I mean, I had 30 grand. That's all I had to start off with. And I had to use investors' money to do this. That first deal, I got 30 grand. I borrowed the rest from an investor. After that, I'm like, I'm tapped. How do I get more? How do I buy more? And so over time, you start to learn those new strategies about how to raise capital to do these deals. And all the resources you need are there. They're all right there for you. It just comes down to understanding the paperwork, understanding the numbers on the deal, and doing it over and over again until you get really, really good at it. So, there's a ton of these strategies. We talk about the single family homes. I flip 5 houses a month right now at a minimum. I sold a house on the way to the meeting today. It was awesome. I'm on the phone having a conversation with a guy, and he's like, look, I'm cool with that. And that deal that I got, I had an investor that I sold a house to in 2012. He needed some funds back for his business. So I said, you know what, I can't buy your property back from you for, you know, the higher price because I need to get it at a discount. I bought a house from him and I put $2,000 down and created a seller finance note at 5% interest for a 10-year term with a balloon payment at the end of 10 years, okay? And then I went and resold, tonight, I went and resold that property to another investor for $15,000 more with $10,000 down and seller financing at 5% for 10 years. The return on investment for the investor is like 50%. It's ridiculous because he's putting 10 grand down. It's not a lot of money down. But then, now I have investors, because I created paper here, to go buy that paper from me on the other side. So it's another way to, another strategy to utilize. I learned the seller finance strategy from sitting in a seminar like this for a weekend, and then getting some consulting advice to understand how it worked, and then getting some legal advice from attorneys to understand that aspect of things. So understanding the structuring components of these types of things, and understanding what your capabilities are and what your investors are looking for and things like that can be gigantic. So that structuring component is huge. Who here has done like a unique deal in the past where they've done something, you know, a little different than, you know, a normal flip or a normal hold? Nobody in the room has done anything. That just totally backfired on me. What the heck is going on here? So I'll give you another example. How about an apartment building? There's 12 units out in Tennessee, okay? And I was into this building for $900,000, which was actually $150,000 more than I wanted to be into it for, because it was built in 1915, and we literally had to redo everything. I'll never buy a building that old again. It was just a nightmare to actually deal with. But we did everything. I mean, to the point where we had to replace every window and door, and the framing on the doors and the windows was all needing to be replaced. We walked into one of the units, we had to kick everybody out. There was 100% occupied with mold all over the windows and the entire bathroom. And I'm going, this is a major health problem. Everybody needs to get out. We gave everybody notice that they needed to move, and we started the renovation project. As soon as we moved that out, we walk into one of the units, and the entire unit was filled with mold. The entire thing. And I'm just like, okay, contractors, thanks, bye, I'm leaving. You guys handle it for me, appreciate it.
Did you incur any legal liability on that?
So when you're dealing with, that's why we kicked the tenants out. So we went to our eviction attorney and said, guys, you know, what can we do to make sure that they move out right away? And you know, we have really good insurance in place, but at the same time, that's why we took action right away to get those guys out of those units. And there was people that didn't want to leave, but we're like, look, we'll pay for moving costs. You know, I'm really sorry that you guys have to move. They really love their place. We'll allow you guys to move back afterwards at an increase in rent. But, you know, nobody wants to do that, of course. So, but yeah, there is liability with that. That's why we had to just kick everybody out, you know, because, we can rightfully do so under the law if it's a health problem. So, and so this deal, I was marketing for $985,000. I had a 1031 exchange client come to me with $1.1 million they needed to buy a property for. And they needed to put $660,000 down and get a $440,000 loan. And so I'm like, this is above my price. How he wants to buy cash flow. He wants to get at least 7 to 8% on his money on this deal with seller financing. He's not using cheap bank financing on this type of a deal. And so because it didn't have any operations on the back end, because I just fully renovated the property, so it didn't have enough history to get a traditional bank loan on it. So I went through and sold it to him for the 1.1, had him put the 660 down, gave him a seller finance $440,000 loan. I didn't have $440,000 in cash just sitting there waiting to be, you know, waiting for this. So I had to backfill that money with investor capital, okay? And then I gave him an interest credit for the difference between the sales price and what he bought it for that 3-year period. So he literally paid no interest for 3 years, got his 1031 exchange done. I got the deal done, sold the note off on the back end, and structured that deal to where it was a win-win for both of us. And so, and he has a brand new building with 100% of the plumbing, electrical, every single thing on that building was brand new. We basically took it down to the studs completely in the whole building. So learning these types of structuring components can really, really help to be able to do more deals. And over time, going to these types of events, learning on your own and things like that can really help. So, you have from the cash flow play, and my goal right now is $50,000 a month in cash flow after 100% of my company overhead is covered with cash flow. I make more than that on my flips with no problem, but I'm talking about a cash flow stream, okay? And so, I got a good chunk of my overhead covered already, but at the same time, it's always, okay, do I hold it or do I reinvest those funds and flip it and resell and then go buy another one and hold that one instead because now I got a bunch of equity. So you can run into a cycle where you're always constantly flipping. Granted, the flipping side can be really, really intriguing because you make these chunks of cash, but you have to have that cash flow base as well for that proper stability. Out here in California, you're looking at like less than 8% margins if you're lucky right now. And that's a tough situation to be in if you're flipping and the market changes, because then all of a sudden you saw what happened last time, right? I mean, you got to be in and out of these things within a 5-month period of time if you're here in California and flipping. And so because of the risk of the volatility, that's why I flip in Tennessee, because I look at the volatility of the market, and during the crash it went down by 4 to 6%, and on average it goes up about 4% a year. And so I can, even on the debt that I'm raising, even if it's at a higher rate than I'm used to, I'm still covering my debt payment with cash flow. So if everything crashes and I have to hunker down for 6 to 8 months, then I'm still okay. My investors are okay. And so you want to look at every situation like that. If you're flipping out here, for example, you don't have that cash flow cushion, to fall back on. What are you going to make 3% and it's not going to pay your debt payment on that? And so when you're doing flips out here, you want to actually go through and look at, if I sold and the market corrected by 20%, am I still break even? Is all my investors going to get their money back? Because your investors, when you raise capital from them, this is them trading their time for money constantly through their whole life. This is hours of their life, so you have to respect their money. If you don't respect their money, you have no business raising capital from investors. And you have to be able to teach them how their money is protected with the paperwork, with the insurance in place, with every aspect of it, including the securities laws required that are part of raising capital and things like that. So it's really important. So the different strategies that I use for cash flow are flipping. I also do value-add multifamilies, like the 12 unit that I did. Last year, I bought a 19 unit for $149,000 that needed about $600,000 worth of renovation work right next to the University of Memphis. At an 8 cap, it's worth 1.735 now. I'm just mad that I have 2 partners on it. I should have just borrowed the money instead. But it was a big risk, right? That's a large renovation. We got a bank loan from a bank at 4.75% and a point, and they did the entire construction loan, which is the only reason I was able to get that is because I have a really good presence in the market and have done a lot of deals already. Most of those types of financing arrangements aren't going to be available to you unless you have experience or have a partner that actually has that type of experience as well to bring to the table, so the bank feels comfortable. You have to have the right financial backing, you have to have the right experience, because we own a management company in Memphis, I own a real estate brokerage in Memphis, and I am not a realtor or a broker. I have another broker that hangs his license with my company. So this is the type of thing relationships can do for you. We pay him on a per transaction basis to be able to now, on every property we offer on, we can get commission back to our management company and our brokerage. So we get 3% back on every acquisition that we do, which is very interesting, unless it's a wholesale unless it's an auction or something like that. But we do a lot of other things too to find these types of deals. We do about 15,000 mailers a month and a pay-by-click campaign as well, and have virtual assistants internationally that are on the phone all day long talking to homeowners on the ground in Tennessee to help us buy these properties at discounts. In January, we bought 7 of them. Some of the deals, when you're doing that strategy, can be great. Out there, we get a 1.5% to 2% response rate. Out here, you get about a 0.5% response rate. You can be spending $30,000 per deal to get a deal out here on direct mail. If you're doing it, wrong or even sometimes doing it right, it depends on the market that you're in. And so, looking at these different strategies to find these deals, all these different things you learn over time. So who here does direct mail or pay-by-click at all? Does anybody do that at all? Okay. Have you guys seen any results from this yet, or how active have you guys been on this?
It's been on and off, but you're right, the return calls and everything.
You gotta have a lot of money up front to front on this, right? And you're like, I hope I get this deal to pay for all this back, right? Otherwise, you just lost 30 grand, you know? And so we use a company that actually has a mathematician on staff that analyzes the entire market for 450 different key metrics to be able to find the people that we're going to mail to that is going to be the most likely to sell us their house. Like a metric might be someone with high credit card balances but's been in a property for a long time and has a lot of equity. That might be one metric, for example. You know, so, and we spend about $12,000 a year just on the data for that alone. You know, but if you look at do the math in the long run, it pays off. And so, you know, you look at these different strategies involved on how to find these good deals. If you don't know how to market, you're not going to get good deals, okay? Especially in California. You have to learn how to market. And so understanding, go to Bigger Pockets, try to learn as much as you can from about marketing and learning these different strategies. And pay by click, try that. Go to a company that specializes in it, and that actually is a lot more efficient. So we track every single call that comes in. We track everything about our marketing campaigns. And that's extremely important because you don't know how good you're going to be or how bad you're going to be from doing that. So flipping properties, very, very important to add to your portfolio on, you know, on being active. Don't just think that you're going to do nothing but holding unless you have all the money in the world to go invest right now to create that passive cash flow for yourself. And what is the goal here? The goal is to create enough income to where your monthly expenses are covered by that income, plus more to reinvest for inflation, because your expenses will rise at a higher rate than your cash flow is coming in, especially with taxes and things like that. And so, and you want to be able to plan for these new things that are coming out too, right? So, or new, you know, if you have a baby coming up, or college and things like that for kids, or, you know, I have a 20-month-old right now, and he has cash flow for kids, and he just wants to eat the pieces right now, but at the same time, he's not there yet, but my wife swears that I'm gonna cause problems for him because I'm like, look, you know, trying to tell him already, you know, so, so you want to be planning for these types of things, and I urge all of you guys, who here has put their budget together and reviews it every single month? Okay, so that's a higher percentage than I expected, honestly. Being a CPA, seeing the wealthiest doctors and attorneys, probably, I'm sorry to doctors and attorneys in the room, but a lot of them are the dumbest I've ever seen with their financial situation. They make a ton of money, so they don't care. You know, and so that becomes a problem. I see their taxes, trust me. When they come to me, or they used to come to me with their taxes, it's like a mess. It's a giant disaster. And so what I'm saying is, you want to be able to, every single month, track what your exact spending is, because you don't know what your goal is until you know where you're at right now. You want to start with your personal financial statement and a budget, okay? Put all of that on paper, and I guarantee you, whatever your estimates are of what you actually spend, you're 100% wrong. Because if you're not tracking it, it's a lot easier to go have that extra meal, or, you know, spend that extra money. And it's a lot easier to actually go make more money than it is to track your expenses like that and cut your expenses down. Nobody wants to live without the basic necessities and things like that. I mean, I don't have cable TV and things like that, mostly because TV's poison and I shouldn't be watching it anyways. So now I know every word to Aladdin, so it's just great, you know? Aladdin and Minions, those are the two things that I know everything about. So I thought my son was calling me Ba, my son is half Vietnamese, and so, which means dad in Vietnamese, but he's just calling Bob the Minion on TV. I'm like, great, I thought he was saying dad the whole time. So, but in reality, really start there. And if you guys need a personal financial statement template or a budget template, send me an email and I'll give you guys mine. So what you want to do is line that out in detail as much as you possibly can with every expense and every piece of income that you think you have. And then for the first couple months, start tracking it. There's a software called Mint out there, M-I-N-T. It's made by Intuit, which what makes QuickBooks. And it can link with every single one of your bank accounts and every one of your credit card accounts and download the transactions automatically and categorize them, and you can set up budgets for yourself right in it and everything. And every once in a while you have a cash transaction, you got to input that, or it doesn't know what a check is, you got to put that in. But it's one of the best ways to really monitor how much you're spending every single month. And I can guarantee you, a lot of you guys, if you're not doing your budget, you're totally off there. Yeah.
I would admit, because I have it, I've had it.
Awesome.
They'll email you, like, hey, you just spent
Right. I have to not put my credit cards to it because our direct mail marketing campaign is linked to our credit cards, and it's like, yeah, you spent way too much money this month. I'm like, great. Yeah, I know what it is.
Budget, like you said, like go out and food, like your budget, you about twice, you're like, oh. Not eating the rest of the month.
I put my wife on the jar system. I'm like, okay, no credit cards. Here's a jar. You have this much for the month. She actually liked it at first, and then afterwards it kind of fell off for a while. So, I'm like, I can't really. I have a kid. I'm done. I just do what she says. So. So start with that. Start with your budget, because then you know exactly where your financial situation needs to be, and every piece of cash flow that you obtain from real estate, apply it to one of your expenses, because it gives you those little wins. If you make $200 a month, go apply it to your cell phone bill and say, look, that's covered. Okay, what's next? What's my next investment? It gives you those little wins along the way, and it really does help you substantially mentally get to that level. And so the flipping is really important, like I mentioned. Secondly, investment properties, holding properties. So what I do is I buy properties, renovate them, tenant them, and then resell them to other investors. Most of my investors are in Japan and China. So I've sold over 400 houses to Japanese investors that live in Japan, and we have translation services set up for them. Our websites are translated into Chinese and Japanese and Taiwanese right now. And we basically go through and continually market that base. The reason why we go to Japan is because their depreciation is amazing. They can write off a house over 5 years for depreciation. So they're buying this, wealthy individuals are buying these things for the depreciation benefits. And the reason why I was joking with my wife, calling myself a financial genius while she rolled her eyes, was because I came up with a strategy that I just recently found that's going to work, where I sat down with what's called a cost segregation specialist. Anybody know what a cost segregation is? Okay, so for those of you guys that don't know, it's basically a building. When you buy it, it's split between land and building. In Tennessee, it's about 20% land, about 80% building. Out here, it's like 50-50 land building, right, depending on where you're at. You write off the building portion over 27.5 years. However, when you do a cost segregation analysis, you analyze the entire building for all the little fixtures and the appliances and the light fixtures and the carpet and every little piece that you get, even the driveway outside, the fencing. You break it apart from the building, and you can make it what you call 5-year or 15-year property, which is depreciated over 5 years or 15 years, okay, depending on what type of an asset it is. Like, your carpet is 5 years, your driveway is 15 years, your fencing is 15 years, your appliances are all 5 years. And so what happens is you can front load your depreciation. So I have a company now that will do that on every single one of my single family homes for $1,000, which normally is not available unless you're dealing with really large commercial buildings. But because I'm doing 5 of these a month, this cost segregation company is interested in working with me on it to do them. And so we have to go out there and measure every piece of it. But what's amazing is now on my single family homes, if I sell a house to a wealthy individual, they can go through and front load all the depreciation, which could be $10,000 immediately in depreciation benefits just for buying a house, on top of the cash flow and things like that. And so I thought about this idea. I'm like, what a great idea to be able to go market to really wealthy individuals this tax strategy. We go market the 1031 strategies as well to them, just like the other deal we talked about. So these types of structures and these strategies really help you with your cash flow goals, because your taxes are your biggest expense. So it really cuts down on the taxes that you have to pay, especially living in California. And so on the buy and hold side, you want to constantly go and continually buy properties, whether it's single family, multifamily, and then there's ways of restructuring those too. So when Christina mentioned about the notes, for example, I really honestly don't need any more capital for my flips right now. I have all the capital I really need from my relationships that will fund me. They'll even fund 100% of my purchase. However, at the same time, what I do is I will sell properties. A lot of the international clients can't get bank financing. So I'll sell it to them with seller financing. They'll put 50% down, and I'll give them a bank loan or a loan from me at 7%, fully amortized over 15 years with a balloon at the end of 7 years. And so then I have a constant supply of a product of 7% to 8% money, promissory notes at 50% of the market value that I go sell to other investors that want the cash flow. That, you know, W-2 investors, a lot of you guys in the room, you know, you're looking for the 8 to 12 and higher returns and things like that. And that's very good for active money. But, you know, a lot of the times you want to invest passively as well. And so there's a big difference between passive and active returns. And so when you're doing this, what I do is I go sell those notes off, or I just continue to collect the cash flow because my profits are built into those loans. So if I go sell a house to somebody for $100,000 and they go put $75,000 or $150,000 and they go put $75,000 down, and I have a note for $75,000 from them at a 7% rate, okay, then. And I'm in it for $20,000 less. I'm in it for, you know, now they just put the 75 down minus, you know, call it $5,000 in closing costs and things like that. So I'm in it for, you know, 20 grand less or 15 grand less than that. My return is not 7%. My return is in the teens for doing that strategy. And so utilizing seller financing strategies can be huge. We do a seller financing strategy to homeowners where we will sell a property to them with 5% down if I don't know them. If they've been in my property for over a year without missing a single payment and they're one of my tenants, we will finance them with no money down because it only costs me $2,000 if I ever have to foreclose in the state of Tennessee, and it costs me 2 months. So that's my risk. I put them on a 15-year fully amortized loan at my sales price, okay? And usually at around a 9 to 9.5% rate, where their monthly payment, including the property taxes and insurance, is equal to their rent amount. And if they refinance, they're dropping their monthly payment by like $400 or $500 a month. Okay, so we're talking about, you know, $150,000 house. You're probably talking about, you know, a $1,500 a month rent or something along those lines. And so then after they have a payment stream come in, I could sell the note just like I could sell a house. And so it's another form of cash flow that you want to look at and understand the note business, because it not only helps you, you know, develop cash flow from those notes, but it also helps you understand new ways of selling properties and gives you tools that you can bring to the table. Now, how do you go sell a note off? Does anybody understand the paperwork for selling a note off? So it depends on the state you're doing business in, but if I want to go sell a note, typically I have a deed of trust that's secured at the recorder's office for that property to secure my loan by the property, to secure it against the property. I also have what's called an assignment of rents and leases. So if that person I loan the money to doesn't pay me, I can collect the rents directly based on that assignment of rents and leases. Okay, and that's recorded at the recorder's office as well. So then when I go and sell that note off, I sign a note purchasing and sale agreement just like a normal purchase contract on a house. It has some different provisions in there. We even put a buyback clause in there where if it defaults, we will buy it back from them, because I could care less if it defaults. If it defaults, then I get to take the property back and go sell it again and make more money. So some investors that are, you know, I have some investors that are in their 80s and don't want to deal with any headaches, and so they really like that clause in there, and I don't mind, because I'm going to be able to take the property back and resell it. And so if the way you do this is you sign what's called an assignment of deed of trust, which assigns the rights of that note to the new buyer. And that assignment of deed of trust gets recorded at the recorder's office, and now they own that note. You also have what's called an allonge that you write on the back of the actual original promissory note, assigning that and giving the rights of that note over to the new buyer. Title insurance transfers automatically to the new buyer in that kind of a situation. Normally when you loan money on a property and we originally sell it, you have what's called lender's title insurance on the property, which actually protects me in that case. And so when you're going through and doing these different strategies, it's really interesting the different cash flow streams you can develop out of them. And, you know, understanding that paperwork involved is really all it is. It's really just understanding that paperwork. What are the protections that go in place for each investor, and how does it work? And another thing that I do is I make sure that my investor that's buying the property from me and putting the 50% down gets really good insurance. One of my largest investors is my insurance agent. He's got millions of dollars with me. And what's interesting is that we have a $2 million general liability policy with 12 months of loss of rents, dog bite coverage taken care of, domestic violence taken care of. I mean, there's a slew of things the insurance company excludes from your policy because they have to make claims on them. And so they start to go through and exclude all these little things in your insurance policy because they don't want to take the risk, and because that's the things they get sued for and what they have to make claims for. And so understanding these little intricacies can be really, really valuable to your investing. And so, yeah, question.
Where do you learn all this stuff? Is it just been...
So going to weekend courses by reputable people, never the ones that are going to upsell you stuff. Now if you guys want to pay me $15,000 for a boot camp all day long, just bring it all in. But no, I don't even do coaching because it doesn't make enough money compared to flips. I actually was doing the math like a week ago on the coaching, and it does, for my time, I literally need to be charging like $1,000 to $2,000 per hour to make that the same amount of money that I do on the flips for my time. And it's amazing when you start to see that aspect of things. So I also work a lot on my flips too for that same amount of money though too. So it's not just you have to look at it versus your time as well. So yeah, these different real estate investment clubs, a lot of the FIBI groups don't do any kind of selling. So any kind of non-sales pitch type clubs, but also those 2-day classes. Like I learned the seller financing class from Gary Johnson and Clyde Wilson, which they're geniuses in their day with this stuff, and they're still geniuses with it right now. But it's interesting what they can teach you about this. And then hire an attorney. You have to spend some money on a good attorney, a good real estate attorney that understands the paperwork. Every single one of your financial advisors, your CPAs, your attorneys, your real estate consultants, your business consultants, if they're not teaching you about the paperwork, they're not worth paying the money to. A lot of CPAs have problems because they don't communicate right. They don't go teach you that, hey, if you have active income in your own name, you're paying 15% in self-employment tax instead of putting it into an S corporation and saving 15% on 66% of your income. So I don't know, I can't even count the number of conversations I've had with realtors and different people that have a ton of income that they're structured wrong, and by having one 15-minute conversation, I've saved them thousands and thousands of dollars. And most CPAs will not teach you this stuff because they want you to pay for tax planning advice. And it's like, look, don't you realize that if you just gave somebody 15 minutes of your time, you're gonna have a client for the rest of your life just by teaching somebody that? It's unbelievable. So like I did this for one realtor that was making $300,000 a year in her own name without a 401k or retirement account set up at all. And I don't believe in the traditional ones. I think self-directed is personally the only way to go with retirement accounts. And I showed her how to save 15% on all of her money. It was ridiculous. And she's now self-directing her money into tons of different real estate investments too. So there's a lot of good strategies out there. So the promissory notes we kind of talked about and touched on a little bit, right? So the promissory notes are great strategies, and you can buy discounted promissory notes as well, but there's a whole nother slew of due diligence that needs to be done on those discounted ones too. You have to understand whenever you're buying a promissory note, what is the guy declaring bankruptcy? What's the reason for the non-payment on these things? What are the major issues involved? Are there title issues? There's a lot of little details with that. And so, one of the guys Christina had up here was Gerald Lemoyne. He's a genius when it comes to these promissory note strategies. So he runs like a note class down in Garden Grove, and I would suggest he's on Meetup. So I would suggest you guys, taking going to his Meetup and learning some strategies on promissory notes. So all of these different things can be good strategies to use. Now, I also invest in syndications. Syndications are absolutely awesome, but they can be dangerous too. There's a lot of really bad syndication deals out there. So who knows what a syndication is? Okay, so a lot of you guys don't. And so this type of stuff is not taught in schools. So syndication is basically a fund. It's someone coming in, so I invest in one, for example, a mobile home park fund, self-storage, commercial properties, other multifamilies that I don't operate. And so what happens is this operator, most of the time they're really seasoned in that specific niche or that asset class, will come in and want to buy a big self-storage or a big multifamily property or something along those lines. And they need to go raise $4 million for this purchase, including getting the bank loan and things like that. And so they'll go and formulate documents with the and register with the SEC for being able to raise funds from private investors this way and pool all their money together into one big fund, okay, for that deal specifically. Most of the time, they're structured where investors get, a preferred return, meaning they get paid before the operator gets paid. So most of the ones I see are typically an 8% preferred return, and then some sort of a split afterwards until investors reach another level and then another split afterwards. So it's incentivized for performance for that operator. Now there's a lot of syndication deals out there that are really, really bad. And so I have friends of mine, and I've reviewed a ton of these things too, that have reviewed these and review tons of different documents from different operators, and they are not all created equal. So you have to, so the documents that go with the private placement that go with the syndication are a private placement memorandum, and then an sophisticated investor questionnaire, and then usually a executive summary and some additional paperwork along with it. But this is more for people that are a little bit more seasoned investors. That's why, so there's different rules involved. So some only allow what's called accredited investors. If you're making, you have to make $200,000 a year per year for the last 2 years, or have $1 million in net worth, excluding your primary residence, to actually invest in that. So they cut out a ton of people, obviously, right? So, but at the same time, there's other funds that don't require that. You just have to be sophisticated, meaning you have the understanding of the risks involved and how to invest in a syndication like that. So in these private placement memorandums, the attorneys write like 5 pages of risks, including the operator could go to Vegas and spend all your money, and that's a giant risk that could occur. They could steal your money, and that doesn't mean that you wouldn't have recourse, there wouldn't be fraud involved. There's also an operating agreement that requires that operator to abide by that contract, that operating agreement, in order to actually operate this fund. So whenever you go into one of these, you have to read in detail that operating agreement, have your attorney read that operating agreement and the private placement memorandum as well. So, but they can be awesome investments too. So the reason why I invest in them, I invest passively in my 401k with these things. I have a self-directed 401k where I flip properties inside my 401k. I have tons of high yield investments inside my own 401k. And most financial planners will say, hey, you need $2 million so that it'll last you until you die over here or close, and you'll die broke. That's like the worst advice I've ever heard. My mom went to one of these guys right before, or right after the crash actually, and sat down with him and said, oh, you're going to lose money for the next 2 years in this if you invest, but after that it'll pick up. I'm like, well, why wouldn't she just wait 2 years? What the heck is going on here? And so a lot of these financial planners, they make money off of trades whether you make money or not. You controlling your own money through your own self-directed retirement account can be dangerous, right? If you don't have your knowledge, if you don't have enough knowledge on this. But it can also be the most empowering thing in the world, because you can take control of your own financial situation. So these syndications, what I do is I put $25,000, $50,000 into each one of these different types of syndications after I've done a ton of due diligence. A lot of times I've flown to the market. I've gone through and done criminal and financial background checks on these operators. I've talked to other investors that they've operated, that have done this. I've reviewed their financial projections to see if they're full of crap or not, right? To see if they're telling me that the property is going to appreciate by 10% a year every year for the next 10 years, and that's how you're getting to your projected returns, And so what I do is I put small chunks of money into multiple asset classes, that I just discussed, in multiple markets around the country, and with multiple operators. So your biggest risks are the property, the operator, and the market in itself. What's happening in the overall market? And you know, there's also construction risk and things like that can occur. So you want to look at, is this a major value add where you're adding, you know, tons and tons of construction, which adds risk? Or is this something small where you have some value add? I personally would not invest in those other outside syndications unless it's a value add, especially at this time of the market. If we're talking about 2012 or, you know, 2011, and I'm looking at these syndications, maybe I'll get something with just straight cash flow that doesn't have a lot of value to add right at that moment, just because the cash flow is much higher and the market is in your favor. So these are the types of things you want to think about when you're investing in these outside deals, but at the same time, it can be one of the best things in the world. The last 2 deals that I did, one of them made me 36% average annual return for 3 years on my money. The other one made me 24% on my money for 4 years. And so these are the last 2 deals that just sold. And so if you look at, it's awesome deals if you know what you're doing, if you can understand the documents, but it starts with your education. It starts with that aspect of things, okay? So who here is in the middle of a flip right now? Okay. What are the headaches are you guys having with these?
The rain.
The rain? But it's California. You can't.
We're not built for rain.
I'm building my own house right now, so I feel your pain. Trust me, I really do. I'm really sick of it, and but in Tennessee, it affects me a hell of a lot more, the rain on that side, and the heat too, because you feel really bad sending your contractors into an attic when it's 110 outside, you know, and the humidity feels like it's 150. I get sick sometimes when I go in and out of houses, in and out of the cold car, and you know, that type of thing because of the weathering. The weather can be a big factor. It can delay you months sometimes, you know, and you know, same thing with the inspections in California. Anybody else have a problem with their flip? Yeah.
Picky buyers.
Picky buyers.
Inspection reports.
So what I do on all my flips is I get a full inspection before I ever go and sell that house. So what I do, and I've learned my lesson the hard way, the reason why I do this is because I've lost money that way. I've sold a house, and then 3 years later, my contractor told me that the AC unit was fully new, brand new, and it wasn't, and it goes out, and I got to cover it later. You know, because I'm dealing with more investors on that case, not an in buyer that, you know, may come back and sue you later or something like that. But so what I do on every single one of my houses now to make sure everything is perfect is I get a full inspection report before and after the renovation with side-by-side pictures of every single thing done with a full disclosure checklist of the age of every single piece of that property, the age of all the appliances, the roof, the plumbing, electrical, everything involved, because I have lost money not having that quality control in the past. And so, you know, what I do is before I go put it on the MLS or sell to a homeowner, I disclose all of it. You always want to err on the side of full disclosure so that all that's up front before you even sign the offer. And what I'll do is, you know, sometimes in California you have multiple offers, so I'll go through and say, here's the inspection report. Are you sure this is your final price? You know, stuff like that. So, question.
If you disclose everything, you wouldn't have to be sued though, right? That's what the
You can still be sued. Anybody can sue you no matter what, whatever they want, they can sue you.
Not if you disclose it, then they'll be
Well,
from court, right? I mean,
Yeah, it will still cost you legal costs and time, no matter if they win or lose. They might have a frivolous lawsuit. I had a homeowner that bought a house from me that was built in 1923 that had grandfathered electric in. On the inspection report, it specifically said on that report that we need to have 2 outlets in the kitchen grounded and 1 wire that was just laying there not attached to anything, taken out of the attic. They went and had their inspector go look at it after the fact and go take a look at it to make sure that I did exactly that. And it was done. He signed off on it. 6 months later, I get a lawsuit on me, or my company, for they want to replace, they're trying to sue me for $15,000 for, they want me to go replace 100% of the electrical in the house because the electrician is saying, I can't just go fix these minor things. I have to do 100% of the electrical because it's old, right? And I'm like, your inspector signed off. This is totally frivolous. Their inspector signed off. They signed off. Everything was full disclosure on every aspect of it. My attorneys had all the paperwork and everything involved. But you can still get sued. Now, they threw it out.
You have to pay your
So-
fees, the legal fees.
Yep. Nope.
Doesn't it get thrown out on a?
You still will have to cover your legal fees. So yeah, you will.
What is the statute of limitations when to sue you?
I don't know the answer to
There
that
is a
question.
statute of limitations, right?
I think it's going to be dependent on each state though too, right? I would assume. So
No, it's 3 years.
is it 3 years in California? Okay. Okay. So I mean, you know, these are the things you have to deal with. I had a headache with a Comcast calls me and says, "Hey, your contractors built a fence and cut our wire." They sent me a picture of a wire sticking out of a ground with a dirt mound 15 feet from the fence that my contractors installed and said, "We need you to pay $2,900 for us repairing this wire." And I'm like, "Can you give me some proof that my contractors did this? It's 15 feet from the fence. This is crazy." And they're like, "Here's our proof. We have the picture. If you don't do it, we're going to have our attorney get involved and we're going to put a lien against your property." And I'm trying to flip this house. So they can go slap a lien on there and then I have to go deal with it in court afterwards and wait and deal with this headache. So I basically played hardball with the guy and settled for like 25%. I was like, forget it. I said, first, you're full of it, and sometimes it's just not worth your time to deal with it. So, you know, and trust me, if I saw the guy in person, I'd want to slap the guy. You know, I'd be like, "That's it, dude. I'm not dealing with the law in this case. I hate you." You know, but you took 25% of that from me, and I'm like, you know, people try to steal from you in this business. That's what happens sometimes. You know, but if you own up, you're going to make mistakes too. And if you make mistakes and you own up to those mistakes, then you're not going to have problems. It's a matter of how you treat people, you know? So you're still going to, I was just laughing at all the stupid little things you have to deal with. So on the flip side, what we do on our flips, and the biggest challenges with flips are your market value and your renovation amounts, okay? Pretty much everything else you can kind of determine and back into your pricing and stuff like that. The market values, you want to understand what, you have to understand the entire neighborhood, and you have to go walk those comps that you think are good comps, and go to those comps and understand that's the same neighborhood. You know, I don't know if anybody here has ever gone around with an appraiser before, but I've walked around with an appraiser as he was appraising a property in California, and basically every single one of those, he says, "Look, this is across the street. You would think it's the same neighborhood, but it's totally different neighborhood. Or maybe that street is a school change just from that. That's the dividing line."
Different city.
Yeah, or it's the same city, but then, you know, they have a dividing line on a school, you know, in a specific school zone. So that property might be, you know, worth a lot less, and so it's not really that comparable. So appraisal is an art. It's not a science. Typically, appraisers are going to want to look within the last 6 months and within a half a mile or a quarter mile of your property out here. In Tennessee, it's half a mile to 0.75 because everything's spread out a little bit more in a lot of those neighborhoods. And so and if you're flipping, you want to look in the last 3 months because you want those comps to be there for your appraiser when you go sell them on the back end. Okay? So those are some of the things that you could run into as far as flipping as problems. On the construction side, is there any contractors in the room? Thank God, I hate contractors. Okay? So I love them sometimes when they do a good job, but what we do now, because there's so many bad contractors out there, that this is how we structure our stuff. We have a spreadsheet where you're laughing, huh? You had this. You're a contractor? Great, dude. I don't hate you. I really don't even know you. It's fine. So this is the problem, is that you go get a bid on a property and you get 5 different bids and they're all over the place. When I'm building my own house in Garden Grove, I bought an 1,100 square foot house that I'm adding 900 square feet to. I had people coming in at $125 a square foot. I had people coming in at $150 and $175 a square foot. I went with the guy that lets me control 100% of the money, and it's at $85 a square foot, which is awesome. And they're like, "You don't see that." I'm like, "I don't know how you're making money, but I don't care because I'm doing this." But I'm making sure that he's still going to make money, even if it costs me a little bit more than that, because the guy is trusting me to handle 100% of the money, which is really rare. You don't see that very often. But on all of my stuff in Tennessee, the way I structure my jobs is I have my rehab manager that gets paid by me, whether we buy the deal or not. He goes through and analyzes the entire property. and he writes down like a preliminary analysis of that property before we buy it. Okay, he does a walkthrough. Then, after we close escrow, we get a full detailed bid where it's room by room, materials and labor separated, and we have a materials spreadsheet that we put together where it's all linked with our Lowe's corporate account. We don't have the Lowe's for Pros. We have a corporate account because we do so much business with them. And so you can get these types of discounts. And so we have a Lowe's corporate account that links directly with the Lowe's website that automatically formulates into our spreadsheet. So we get, during the walkthrough, he goes and gets all the measurements of the entire property, and we get a full layout. So we know how much paint, how much carpet, the exact numbers on every room of that property. And then we plug that in, the numbers on the rehab bid, and then it formulates directly from our materials list. And on that materials list, we have an estimated time and labor and hourly cost that it would take to do those items. So we can get a general idea of the actual rehab costs and the rehab labor side. And so we take that materials list, we never show our contractors the labor piece, we take the materials cost, most contractors bid based on materials cost, and then you're gonna hate me for this, we go through and put it at 80% and show them the 80% figures of the materials cost, so then they bid on the 80% instead of the full cost of the material. So we usually get another 20% off on that, but we also have contractors that we've worked with over and over and over again. So, you get to know people and understand how they work. And we also, every single property comes with a contract. And every contract that we have has penalties and bonuses. If they're done early, they get $100 a day for being done early. If they are done late, after a week, a week to 2 weeks, depending on the contractor, we will enact a $100 per day penalty on them as well. And so, sometimes we don't always abide by that if there's a big issue that comes up or something like that, or there's some rain or major weather issues. Sometimes in Memphis you really can't drive because it's so cold outside and things like that. And so, when we're looking at these bids, we go through and get the bids from our contractors and hold them to it, and then we don't pay them the final payments until we do a final walkthrough. We do what we call a blue tape walkthrough. We walk through the entire house, opening every door, every little thing that we can think of, and we mark down. I don't care if the caulking in the kitchen is a little off. We're like, there's a blue tape. We want this thing perfect every single time, because the reason why is because if you start to not do that, if you start to let them have a little leeway, if you're using them over and over again, what typically happens is their time goes up, their quality goes down, and their price goes up as well. So we have multiple contractors that we use because we want them to know that we have other people to go to as well. Question?
How do you deal with last day of construction, and then you go back and you find out that something didn't really work out the way it was planned, and you find little mistakes here and there? How do you get the contractor to come back? How do you give them that extra day? Do you do it in advance? And how do you get them to come back? Yes, that's the question.
We do so much activity that it's easier for us to do that than one flip at a time or something like that. The hardest part is that is always going to be a challenge, and usually after the final payment, after we've done the punch list, we do one more walkthrough to try to solve as many of those little issues as we can. But if you don't have, your contractor can always walk on you in a situation like that, unless they know they're going to get more business from you in the future, and then you can say, look, I got another deal coming up, right? Like really quick. I just need you to handle this final item on this, and that's always a challenge. Those little items that they got to go back to, if something, and when we have a tenant that moves into a property like that, that's when you find those things. And so, if it's something that we should be they should be warranting, we'll send them back. If it's something that's just minor that, it's really hard to catch every little thing, So like we've had it a couple times where, plumbing checked out, inspection checked out, everything was fine. And then 3 months later, the line to the street needs to be replaced. And you're like, great, what am I supposed to do now? It's not really the contractor's fault, in a situation like that, even though, he looked at it and stuff, and our inspector even looked at it or something along those lines. So, those little things are always difficult. What I typically do is say I have another deal coming up, which I usually do, and then say, look, I'm not going to give you that next deal until you finish this. I need this done like ASAP. Can you do this for me? And I'm going to go take care of it, you know, and I'll get you the next deal too. That's usually the best way to do it, but it's hard to do that if you're doing one-offs, you know, so.
We were just talk about, you know, communication with your people, you know, general contractors and stuff. We're talking about FaceTime and stuff like that. A lot of people in here are doing that, you know, getting communication between them. How do you handle that?
So I do a weekly call with my rehab manager that goes by the properties every single week. And so, and we do a Google video call, and a lot of times I'll do FaceTime at the property so I can understand it. I even have a roamer that goes around on top of my rehab manager and takes a look at all the properties and runs by all of our holds once a month, goes by our multifamilies, walks the premises to understand what's going on with those properties, or if there's tires that someone left, or, you know, trash or whatever it is. So the communication now with the technology is amazing. You can basically be there, you know. So, question here?
So yeah, also dealing with contractors. Seems like you deal with a lot of older buildings.
I did. I won't too much anymore, but yeah.
For example, older deal, heavy renovation. Solicit business from a bunch of different contractors. You get a winning deal.
Mm-hmm.
They quote you X, and then they start working on it, and then they figure out that they did not quote enough, and a whole scope creep issue. And you can look at it and say, well, you know, you didn't know what was behind that wall either, but they got into it. Anyway, how do you deal with some of those, you know, after the fact revelations that dramatically increase?
What I've done is I try to mitigate that as much as I can, where I will have someone quote me, and multiple people quote me on the demo first, and then have them go demo, have them, you know, if there's plaster on walls and a lot of these old things, a lot of times you can't.
Do the demo separate from.
Yeah, I'll go through and do the demo first, then I'll have them quote it, because there's a lot less hidden items, you know, at that point. Now, during the demo, you might find that your deal sucks. And you're sitting there going, great, what am I going to do? This is going to be way higher than I originally anticipated. And especially when you're dealing with older properties, you have the plaster issue on the walls, which really you can't just put drywall or patch it most of the time. You have to go through and replace the drywall, you know? So, you know, in those types of situations, I try to, so I don't let them buy any materials. We buy 100% of the materials. So I tell them if there's any change orders, they need to show me what those change orders are in their labor time, and why it's going to take that long. And if it's like a general contractor that's working with subs on any change orders, I don't let them make a markup on those change orders. So, and what we do on our stuff is we go through with our all of our materials list, and we have it with the SKU numbers, or we order it all online, and it's sitting at Lowe's on a pallet, or we can go through for our contractors to pick up all the materials. And if there's any missing little items, they send us SKU numbers of what they need, and then we go handle that and keep that in-house. Because, you know, what happens a lot of times, you have a lot of waste too that happens. Like, they'll go have extra paint. We paint all of our rentals the same gray color on the inside, you know? It's the same exact cookie cutter stuff, every single. It's easier to do it on rental property, right? And so, you know, we go through and do that entire strategy where we'll use extra materials from other jobs and keep that stuff in reserves and in our warehouse to be able to go do other jobs with as well. And so, yeah, it's a hard thing when you're dealing with the change orders and that kind of thing, but I typically go through and only limit them to their labor, and then tell them they can't have that markup if there is change orders in the job. And I set that expectation up front though too. So all of this stuff with the contracts, with how you work, how you're going through your job, what you expect, the holdbacks that you're gonna have, all of that kind of stuff, you wanna set that expectation up front before the job even starts. Because if you try to do it during, you're gonna have contractors yelling at you, basically. So, question?
Your rehab manager, does he have his contractor's license and then hire subs that do or don't, or do you only hire licensed subs as well?
So, it depends on the state you're doing business in. If you want to change a toilet in California, you need to have a contractor's license. If you in Tennessee, if the renovation is under $25,000, you don't need a contractor's license. So my rehab manager doesn't have his contractor's license, but he's built houses. He's gone through and done, he used to work for large hotel chains where he would do major renovation jobs for them and be detailed. He knows QuickBooks. I love the guy. It's amazing. I'm like, a contractor that knows QuickBooks. I'm loving it. You know? So, you know QuickBooks? Okay, there you go. Sorry to pick on you. Question in the back over here.
Do you ever have a thing where they don't want to sign that, because I've had contractors and they didn't want to sign the thing about the penalties? I mean, do you just get rid of those people, don't hire them, or?
So that negotiation depends on the timing of the market. So if you are dealing with the market right now, yeah, it's going to be very hard to get them to do that in California right now because they're very, very busy. If you are in 2010 and try to get that, it's no problem. And so every once in a while I get pushback. And then I ask them up front, how long do you think this job will take? If they say 3 weeks, I say, are you sure it's going to take 3 weeks? Okay, look, I'm going to give you 5 weeks. Do you think it's fair? And I asked them, do you think it's fair if after the 5 weeks, if I charge this penalty? But if you get it done before 3 weeks, I'm going to give you a bonus too. And I do this because, and I tell them up front, this is how much interest I'm paying per day for the overages that would be charged. And that's why I have to do it. And I ask them, are you okay with that? And it's a matter of communication. And it's very, very, can be delicate because they don't want to sign that clause, you know, because sometimes they go bid and say, oh, it's going to take 3 weeks when they know it's going to take 2 months or something along those lines because they want the job. And then what happens also is they will leave and go to the next job before yours is done because they got to work on their next job. They're always looking, where's the next paycheck? That's how that business works, is they're constantly looking for that next paycheck to make sure that they have work consistently because they don't want to have all their crews and their guys just sitting there not working. That costs a ton of money and then they start losing people. It's very, very difficult, and that's one of the reasons why I do that amount of activity that I do, because it gives me the flexibility of being able to constantly have another job for my guys to use and constantly be able to use the same people over and over again, and they know that I'm going to have another job for them.
But
you know?
if you tell them this and they still don't want to sign it,
Go to-
you just say,
yeah,
"Fill out your stuff."
Go and get another bid from somebody else. There's so many referrals you can get out there.
Sorry, quick question. I purchased a property, completely passive turnkey property in Memphis about 4 months ago.
Okay.
It's been brilliant, wonderful, and I intend to purchase more. But I'm curious why you're so focused on Tennessee as a market, because you are talking about quite a bit, and I'm just curious what.
So I invest primarily in Memphis and Atlanta, Georgia. I did an economic analysis on a lot of the different markets in the country before I decided to invest there. And one of the things I liked was the lack of volatility, where I knew if I'm flipping, then I'm still going to be in a safe position, and California is going to crash before Tennessee does. So last time I had pretty much like a year leeway almost, even though I still took a hit because I was green at that time, you know? And so, in addition to that, I like some of the things that are happening there. St. Jude just put in a $6 billion expansion. Nike has a plant there. Electrolux has a plant there. A lot of the government's giving them tax incentives to bring their manufacturing jobs back. Yeah, and it's a FedEx. It makes it a central distribution hub of the U.S. So, and the thing about Memphis is you got to watch out for your neighborhoods. Where did you buy at?
It's in
Whitehaven?
Whitehaven, yeah.
Okay.
I bought it from Mid-South. You find out?
I know them.
Yeah.
Mid-South. Terry is one of my best friends. He's a great guy. I typically in Whitehaven, it's hit or miss on the neighborhood. You have to be very careful of the neighborhood. A lot of the areas in Memphis, you want to be very careful. I don't buy in the Raleigh-Fraser area, the northern side, because that's where most of the crime is concentrated. I don't like dealing with the lower end tenant base. I typically, Terry buys properties that are in the $50,000 to $75,000 range, something like that. I typically buy houses that are in the $100,000 to $200,000 range. I like the tenant base better. I've also had some headaches. Terry has found a way to manage that lower end asset class. I hate managing that lower end asset class. I don't want to deal with the tenant turnover and vandalism and theft. I bought a house in the beginning in the hood out there. The manager took me around during the day on a weekday instead of at night and on a weekend. And I'm like, trees, this is amazing. Coming from California, beautiful. And I go at night and I'm like, crackhead. You know? And so like, and I've had to rehab a house like 3 times because, you know, someone moves out, the neighborhood knows about it before you do, and they go vandalize it and all that stuff. But, you know, Terry's got some great strategies for that. Like he'll buy aluminum AC units where they'll go take the AC unit apart in some of those low-end neighborhoods and just leave it there because there's no copper. And then you just put it back together, you know, and it's like here's $100 instead of $3,000. But like even in my high-end neighborhoods, I cage every AC unit because it's $250 to save a $3,000-$4,000 system. You know, it makes sense to do it. You know, so, but yeah, Terry's got a great management company. I use him as well. He manages about 400 of my investments right now. So he takes me to every Memphis game there is, you know? So, but yeah.
Following up on that question, I'm considering my first kind of turnkey out of California project that's out of my comfort zone. I've been doing kind of fix and flips and hard money lending. Is it a good idea? This is not a full-time thing for me and it won't be anytime soon. But it's just a one-time project. I'm looking at a Memphis or Detroit or Cleveland, some of these good markets for that. To go through one of these turnkey companies, if I'm just looking to do one for maybe my IRA?
So first thing is it depends on the property management. I have a very negative connotation about Detroit in itself and that market specifically. There was a lot of Section 8 stuff. I won't touch Section 8 at all because you can't. You can't. They're judgment proof. The tenants are judgment proof in that in some of these low end houses. So you know you want to be very careful about the low end aspect of that. So I personally think turnkey investing can be great, but there's some pitfalls with it as well. Okay, and I sell turnkey houses, but the problems with turnkey is that they're not always turnkey. You want to go and make sure every single time you buy one, you get that full inspection report, and that property should have all the preventative maintenance done for 10 years at least. Okay, so what that means is you're looking at every item in that report saying, my water heaters have a 15-year useful life, so I need to make sure that I have 10 years of useful life. If not, allocate money for that on the side. Roofs out in Tennessee can have 20, 25 years. They're not going to be 30, and 25 you're lucky because there's more rain. There's more weather out there, right? It comes down to the renovation and the tenant quality. So tenanting, a lot of times when I buy a property that is occupied, I will ask for any background check information. I'll ask for any information I can get on that tenant, why they were qualified in the first place. So, because turnover will kill you. If you have a bad tenant and they just throw somebody in there, that can be a problem. And so that can be an issue. Now, buying inside your IRA can be a problem as well if you're trying to get financing on it. Okay, if you're going through and trying to get financing on inside your IRA, you have a debt financed income tax associated with the financing portion of that. But if you bought it in your 401k, you don't have that debt financed income tax. Okay.
One of the really quick follow-up. It sounded like most of the guys you're selling these houses to, that Asian money, these are repeat people coming back. What percentage of your people are like me, one-time guys or one-off guys?
A quarter. Yeah. I have about a quarter of that aspect, and the rest of them are international, mostly because I have a really good system set up internationally for marketing and things like that. So I've even flown to Japan and done a presentation in Japan where I had a translator and I was trying to actually say a sentence or 2 sentences and let them translate, and then say another couple sentences and let them translate. It was like the hardest thing in the world. I'm like, I kept losing my train of thought over and over and over again, so. But yeah, we deal with that a lot. Actually, I do something a little different as well, where I don't just go and resell a property to an investor. We'll actually do a joint venture with them at our cost where we have no markup. We do it at our cost. We take 25% of the cash flow and 50% of the equity whenever we sell it. An investor puts the 20% down and gets the bank loan, and then in our joint venture agreement, I'm 50% obligated for that bank loan as well. So that way it aligns our interest, so I'm not making money up front on some of those deals. Now, some investors don't want a joint venture, and a lot of times I don't want a joint venture with some investors because some people are crazy. Like, I fired some investors. I had an investor that I borrowed money from and then had him sign the lien release to get paid back from the closing attorney. He sent the release to the closing attorney, got paid back, and then went and called the closing attorney, calling her an idiot for giving the money back, saying we screwed him because he's losing a month's interest before I could reinvest his money, and screams at me, wastes an extra hour of my time, my employees' time, talking with them too. And I'm like, you're fired. I've never had an investor yell at me for getting their money back. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, you know? So, I mean, there's some crazy people. You got to be careful when you're dealing with people's money. So, that being said, I really think, having a strategy that incorporates multiple income methods is the best strategy to use. And it comes down to buying and holding with the capital you have. And if you don't have capital, look what I'm doing with the joint ventures. If you find a good deal, I use that for my buy and holds. I get 50% of the equity pay down on these things. And I'm not putting capital up, but I'm buying a property, renovating it, putting a tenant in place with my capital, and then or a private investor's capital that I procured, and then I'm reselling it at my cost, getting cash flow out of it without any of my own money. But I'm also providing a ridiculous value up front on the other side of things too, and bringing built-in equity to the table on those deals. So you can do this without your own capital. You don't have to have your own capital. It helps. Don't get me wrong. And once you have more of it, it really does help. But that money's out there. I mean, Dave in the back has flip money at 8 and 2 right now. Is that right? Yeah. I mean, the money's there. That's great capital for dealing with flips here when the margins are thinner. So, flipping, holding, learning syndications, understanding the promissory note structure and what it does for you on the flipping side. All those different things can be huge. I mean, and there's a million ways to create cash flow. I'm about to do an Airbnb for the first time on my rental in Garden Grove, and so that, based on projection, should be making me $1,500 to $2,000 a month for a $12,000 investment. Isn't that ridiculous cash flow? That's amazing. And so, but am I taking a risk on my $12,000 unsecured? Absolutely. But at the same time, it's worth the risk for me to try it for the first time and go after it, So, I mean, there's a ton of different strategies you can use, and, I'm just touching on it. The relationships are more important than anything. Those relationships and those resources that bring to the table, like my larger investors that invest millions of dollars with me, like, you know how easy it is for me to flip houses now and raise the money? I don't have to worry about money on houses anymore ever again to deal with that, because I have really, really deep pockets that have referred me deeper pockets and deeper pockets. And it's interesting how that works. Question?
Talking about risk tolerance, what are your indicators that you look at for market alarms to judge your shift in the market?
I look at the affordability index often. It's funny. It's a hard thing to gauge, especially living here in California. You can feel softening of the market here when you're flipping out here. Out there, I don't really feel the softening as much because I've set up really good marketing systems. And so, I look at all the data as much as I possibly can. I read Zero Hedge. I read Bigger Pockets. I read Dr. Housing Bubble. All these guys are great sources. Now, they're a little pessimistic, which they rightly should be. They just kicked the can down the road. We probably will have a bigger crash. I don't know when it's going to happen. Seems pretty optimistic right now, but everybody was really optimistic in 2006 too. So I got my eyes wide open and I'm trying to protect myself. I would say in this kind of a market, do your deals. Keep pushing. Make sure they're shorter term, not longer term deals. You don't want something that's going to take you a year to finish right now, because that's a lot of time on that market right there where your values could drop. And be high in cash reserves so you can get yourself out of a situation if you need to. Those are the types of things I would focus on. Question?
Can I ask, what were your top 2 lessons from the last cycle?
Top 2. Only 2, huh? So, 1, learn how to raise money fast and have that be a big resource for you and constantly procure money until you have enough of it. Don't do business with partners that, my partners were really, really smart, but I learned to not do business with people that didn't work as hard or bring enough value to the table as far as what their skill sets were. There's a lot of people that will not bring enough to the table, so you want to be very careful who your partners are, okay? I had a buddy of mine that, you know, I got to blame myself because I put myself in the position. It cost me $500,000. It hurt real, there was some crying, definitely crying. But I found out about it the night before I went on a 2-week cruise to Europe. I just drank a lot on that trip. I'm like, time to drink. Here's enough money to fund you right now so you can live for 2 weeks. I'm out. But yeah, you know, the partnership thing is really, really important, and you don't realize people's mindsets or their skill sets until you're involved with them. So, you know, that aspect of things I think is important. And understanding your numbers. Don't ever buy a property that you're pushing your numbers on and you're not comfortable with. Have buffers like crazy involved. You know, so those are the types of things I think I would focus on. So, thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.